Okay, welcome to the second video lecture on the persuasive essay, and we've talked about how the persuasive essay is different from an argumentative essay or an opinion essay, and now I want to turn our attention more directly towards the actual essay itself. So hopefully this video lecture will begin to help you understand how to approach this particular essay. So the thing is called a persuasive essay, and yes, a persuasive essay is one that persuades, but in order to do that, we have to take into account several things. And these are things that I want you to take into account as you're thinking about what you want to write about for your persuasive essay. And the first thing is to establish that there's some sort of problem that needs to be addressed. So there's establish that there's a problem that exists. And if we can't clearly show that there's a problem that needs to be solved, then we can't really expect to persuade an audience that they need to do something. So after we establish the problem, we need to explain why it's something that we need to address and why the audience should care. In other words, why should the audience prioritize this particular or specific problem? And then finally, we should be giving our audience some sense of a solution, right? A course of action or something like that. And in other words, you want your audience to know, do, or believe something at the end of your essay. You want them to say, hey, yes, this is a problem. I understand why it's a problem. And now I understand what to do about this problem. So let's look at an example, and let's just say that mutant problems are buying ice cream. Now, the first question, and I'm glad you asked, is, why is this a problem? So, okay, maybe it's a problem because mutant penguins are huge and they eat lots of ice cream and they can be vicious if you try and take their ice cream. So there is a threat here of these penguins buying all of the ice cream. Next, I need to explain why this should be addressed. I don't want to just assume that my reader or audience understands why. In other words, what are the consequences if we just leave this thing alone and don't pay any attention to it? How is it going to affect the audience? So if we don't stop them, they're going to eat all of our ice cream. So no ice cream for us. There won't be any left. And maybe mutant penguins get extra violent when they have ice cream headaches. Okay, so hey, there won't be any ice cream and somebody could get hurt. So now we have a problem. We have why we should address it. And then the next thing is, of course, the solution. So what's the possible solution to this? What can be done about it? Obviously, we could send someone to negotiate with the mutant penguins. We could help them understand that we all deserve ice cream, or we can figure out a way to share. But again, we need to provide some idea of how this should be addressed, because we don't want to just simply point out that a problem exists. My audience may be well aware of the problem, and they may need to know how serious a problem is and how to address it. Another way to sort of think about this, another example that I often use, is imagine that a house is on fire, and people may already know that the house is on fire. They can see the flames and the smoke. We want to explain why it's a problem for them. Now, if it's their house, they already know. But maybe it's that the fire could spread to other houses, and we also need some sort of significant course of action, say getting buckets of water or calling the fire department. But of course, the action and the significance of the problem depends entirely on who the audience is. You know, again, the person who owns the house knows why it's a problem. The neighbors, they have a vested interest. But if the house is on fire in a different country, your audience may not care, may not directly affect them, and that might be because there's nothing in particular that they can do about it. So if I address a problem, I want to be as specific as I can about things. So saying something like global warming is bad is problematic for a couple reasons. Number one, a lot of people are probably going to say, yeah, it is bad, or they might say, hey, it doesn't exist, or whatever that is. So this is kind of a vague statement that we could make stronger by saying, hey, global warming is damaging our environment and may lead to a shortage of arable land, that is land that we could plant crops on. So we want to make sure that we're taking a stand on things and that we're being very specific about some aspect of this, especially if it's a broad topic like, say, global warming. From there, we want to make sure that we have some sense of solution, and that solution may be a part of your thesis statement, but you should have some sort of, hey, we should do this, or we should consider this. Now, again, this could be part of your, or thesis statement, maybe the course of action or the solution. It doesn't necessarily have to come later in the paper. But a weak statement is one that lacks specificity, and your audience won't know how to go about building awareness since it's a rather broad statement. But if you advocate a specific course of action, then you can persuade your audience to do something and take that course of action. So something better than this would be something like, by imposing strict restrictions on emissions from new automobiles, we can begin to decrease the amount of pollution in the air and help prevent the loss of arable land. So again, what you can see here is that both of the examples that I provided here in the previous slide and this one, in the better column, is that they could be thesis statements. So you might incorporate your solution into the thesis statement if that is your goal, but you might also want to just establish how significant a problem is and then save that solution till later. And again, it depends on what your topic is, who your audience is, and how you approach it. So there you go, just a little bit on the basics of thinking about the framework. Again, kind of like soapstone when we talk about speaker, occasion, audience, and purpose. We want to take all of that stuff into account, but in this case, the purpose and the audience are kind of our main focus. All right, so there you go. Questions, comments, concerns, jokes, memes, recipes. Let me know otherwise.